There's always some kind of agreement of value among producers so that they can exchange their surplus. And this speaks to the potential for crypto, precisely because it's private money, precisely because its owners or its issuers have some semblance of control over it. They have the potential to issue stable crypto measures that hold their value throughout time. And with that, that's something that government money hasn't fulfilled in modern times. There's been all sorts of instability, and I think that instability drove the rise of crypto, and it sets the stage for the issuers who recognize that money is best when we don't talk about it.
Hi everyone, this is Veronica Kirilenko of the New American Magazine. Just months ago, FTX looked like a major success story in the cryptocurrency world. Until its demise, the celebrity-endorsed company was the third largest cryptocurrency exchange by volume. And when it collapsed and its supposed $32 billion valuation evaporated, the entire crypto market lost billions, reportedly dropping below $1 trillion in value. The FTX's former CEO, Sam Bankman-Fried, was arrested in the Bahamas on criminal charges filed by the Justice Department. The experts are debating the implications of the FTX collapse, many of which seem rather grim. Today, I'm honored to be joined by John Tamny, the political economy editor at Forbes, the senior economic advisor to Toreador Research and Trading, and the editor of RealClearMarkets.com. Recently, John came up with an insightful book titled The Money Confusion: How Illiteracy About Currencies and Inflation Sets the Stage for the Crypto Revolution. John, welcome and thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. So what's your reaction to the news of SBF's arrest today?
I generally do not like the idea of someone being put in handcuffs for failing. I want more people trying to invent a new future. And when they're trying to invent a new future, there's going to be failures. Any new industry or sector is going to have lots of instances like this. Now, if it's true that money was stolen or taken, that's a different story. But I feel like people are innocent until proven guilty. And so the idea that they're leading with handcuffs, I think is a dangerous precedent. It empowers government always at the expense of entrepreneurs. And I just think it sets the stage. It almost puts a chilling effect on innovation if this is what you're going to get when your innovation maybe doesn't work out.
But the charges brought up against him look very serious, don't you agree?
It would appear, but my sense is there's just a lot we don't know. And I want to be clear, I've got no relationship with FTX, no relationship with Sam Bankman-Fried. What my relationship with this is we've seen this before. There's this desire when a business doesn't work out to impugn failure on them. If you go back to 2003, after Enron, or actually no, 2001 and 2002, after Enron and WorldCom failed, suddenly Congress rushes to enact a bill, Sarbanes-Oxley, that basically turned criminal CEOs into accountants, where they had to account for every little thing. And if they were wrong, they could face jail time. I don't want a capitalist system this way. A capitalist system is going to be defined by lots of failures. I think we should be reluctant to indict ourselves to basically judge Sam Bankman-Fried until we know all the facts.
John, okay, despite the extensive news coverage, the whole story seems very tangled to everyday people. Would you please start by explaining in layman's terms what the FTX was, how it operated, and how it went bankrupt?
Well, I think it's impossible to know how it went bankrupt. And the reason I say that is because a lot of big, smart money was behind FTX until the dying day. And so if there was an obvious tell that it was going to go bankrupt, they would have known and they would have pulled long ago. My sense is if you look at any kind of sector, anytime there's a big drop or volatility in the prices of that which defines the sector, there's going to be a lot of fiery failures like this. So my strong sense, and this is no insight, is that they were over leveraged based on past optimism about their own currency, the FTT, and the future of cryptocurrency in general. And so when prices started to decline, that they were revealed as not as financially healthy. FTX was an exchange for cryptocurrencies, of which there's all kinds. There are other businesses we hear about. Alameda was a research arm that apparently also was engaging in speculation too. My sense is we're going to learn a lot, but I'm not ready to judge yet, because I think if you look at history, what we assume now or what we assume in the near term rarely ages well.
Mm-hmm. You know, numerous journalistic investigations into FTX and Fried, who was the second biggest donor to the Democrats, by the way, suggest that the company was likely a part of the Democrat money laundering scheme. Bloomberg, for example, reported in November that the United States Attorney's Office opened probe of FTX for money laundering months before it collapsed. What is known for a fact about the alleged money laundering activities of the FTX?
I have not seen any factual information yet. It is a known quantity. All you had to do was pick up any newspaper in the months and probably years leading up to this most recent election cycle in November. Sam Bankman-Fried had emerged as a very major donor to the Democrats. Is that on its own an indictable offense? My reaction to it is that it speaks to the problem today. If you don't have a man or men in Washington, you can get caught up in things. To remember how Bill Gates, when the Justice Department took him to court in the late 90s, and it never occurred to him to have people in Washington. He was back in Washington State creating software. And so I think there's a tendency among new businesses to throw money around just to basically buy protection, which I find kind of sad. I guess Bankman-Fried directed a lot of his toward Democrats. I've heard there's some Republicans too. Again, it speaks to the sad truth about modern times, in that businesses feel they need to have protection in Washington. And that signals something about government that's grown too large. I don't like it.
Yeah, who does? So what exactly was, this another controversial topic, the nature of the relationship between the FTX and the Ukrainian government? Fried said in one of his CNN interviews that the idea was to facilitate cryptocurrency donations from individuals around the world in such a way that they would be converted to fiat for Ukraine to use for aid. What's your comment on that?
I think it speaks to the possibility of crypto. I've heard something similar in Afghanistan. The women there, for reasons that we know of or we're told, are very repressed. And so traditional banking, traditional access to money is limited to them. And so Afghan women with access to Bitcoin, because it's an account that can't be touched or taken, can essentially move around and have a reasonable currency, a reasonable medium to basically exchange for things. It makes people who are unfree more mobile than they otherwise would be. Is it any surprise that something similar was tried in Ukraine? Because if you look at what happened once the bombing began, a lot of Russians were doing something somewhat similar, in that they had dollar-based bank accounts in Russia, and they were trying to drain them so that they could move. They knew that if they got out of the country, that the ruble wouldn't exchange for too much anywhere, but the dollar would. Is it any surprise that crypto would play a factor here? That's its presumed role, as a way for people to have access to their wealth at any time from anywhere, without the routine limits put up by traditional banks.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask you, it's more of a speculation, of course, but since the FTX story exploded, 3 crypto millionaires have died. which in light of the developments in the cryptocurrency world seems, of course, rather suspicious. What's your take on these deaths?
I hadn't heard about them. I would like to think, I would like to hope that it's purely coincidental. But I've heard nothing about them, so I can't really comment on them. Uh,
Well, this is fine, Jen. The most important question is, some analysts say that the scandal won't have, the FTX scandal in general won't have that bad of an impact on the industry in the long run, and the others argue that the governments will try and use it as a justification for more regulations. What are your predictions?
um, Here's my prediction is that, yeah, I wouldn't call FTX a scandal yet, but its collapse won't hold down crypto. I mean, let's look at this from a historical perspective. A little over 100 years ago, thousands of US car makers were incorporated, given excitement among investors about the future of the automobile. Just about every one of those companies failed. Was this corruption? Did this signal the decline of the automobile? No, it signaled the automobile's staying power, that a lot of investment went in, and the few survivors transformed how we lived. Fast jump ahead about 80 years. Think about roughly when the 21st century began. The internet was all the rage, and enormous amounts of money flowed into internet companies, most of which failed. Was it a signal that the internet was over, that it was dead and everything? No, certainly not. It signaled the internet staying power as a fact of life. And so my strong sense is that we'll see something similar here. Is that, and I argued this well over a year before the crypto collapse. I said, we'll know that it's for real once its coins start collapsing. And so my strong sense is that from this, we're going to get a much more vibrant crypto industry, and it's going to reveal itself as having much greater staying power than pundits at present are saying or willing to admit.
This is why you use phrase crypto revolution in the title of your book. Is it correct?
Yes. Let me be clear. My book is about money. And in that, I make the point, however, at the beginning and the end, that the carnage that was starting to reveal itself in the crypto space as I was finishing my book and as I was writing it does not signal the end of crypto. It signals, once again, its staying power. You had to have the correction that we're experiencing right now for these coins to develop some semblance of credibility. You had to weed out all the speculation and all the wild-eyed excitement from a lot of people who don't understand what money is in the first place. You had to have that so that there could be knowledge. You'd had to have a base of knowledge born of failure and success and in between in order for crypto to evolve. And so I said it when crypto was all the rage, that the collapse would be the source of optimism, and I remain of that view.
Yeah, I looked up the description of your book on Amazon, and I think one of the probably most important descriptive phrases that you use, sentences, it's read, in truth, trusted money in circulation is a natural consequence of commerce, not the instigator as economists imagine. Would you explain that, please?
Yes. The point of that, and it's basically the foremost point of the book, is that money is as old as commerce is as old as production is. And money in circulation always reflects goods and services circulating as though it was put there by the, quote, invisible hand that brought the goods and services there in the first place. And if you look throughout history, seashells used to play a role as money, cowrie shells, cigarettes. You go into any prisoner's camp to this day, or you look at post-war countries, very often cigarettes emerge as the currency of choice. There's always some kind of agreement of value among producers so that they can exchange their surplus. And this speaks to the potential for crypto, precisely because it's private money, precisely because its owners or its issuers have some semblance of control over it. They have the potential to issue stable crypto measures that hold their value throughout time. And with that, that's something that government money hasn't fulfilled in modern times. There's been all sorts of instability, and I think that instability drove the rise of crypto, and it sets the stage for the issuers who recognize that money is best when we don't talk about it, when it's just the stable measure. And again, if you look throughout history, money's always emerged wherever there's production. It's always there.
I'd like to get your comments on another related developments. We know that the Biden administration is actively pursuing the central bank digital currency. Many stakeholders are already involved actively in its developments. What's your prognosis concerning the CBDC? Is it imminent, or is there anything that people, and is there anything that people could do to avert the kind of future in which their transactions can be restricted in the name of climate change or whatever noble cause the government would come up with?
Well, I'm not worried about it. And let me explain why. Government can't issue a currency that is actually credible in this space simply because government doesn't understand money. I mean, one of the things that I make clear throughout the book is that currency devaluations, whereby workers are robbed of the fruits of their labor, is as old as government involvement in money is. Getting right to the point, governments have always devalued. This isn't a central bank thing. This has always been government policy. There are better governments than others on the matter. The fact that the dollar is the world's currency is a signal that our government in the U.S. has done a much better job than others. But let's be clear, they've all in different times devalued. And so the idea that suddenly, if the Fed just issues some kind of central bank digital currency, that they'll get money right in a way that people will want it over the private measures, vandalizes common sense. Who would want to use a government currency that once again could be robbed of its value? That's what governments do. And so I'm not worried about the Fed's currency somehow overtaking others, simply because government's history is what it is. And so nice try. I don't think it's going to mean very much.
So, John, do you have any message to everyday Americans? We live in such a turbulent world, and inflation is raging. Everything is just so expensive, and people lost their savings over the last couple of years, of course, during the pandemics and lockdowns. How to minimize this negative impacts on their well-being right now, besides buying your book, of course.
Yeah, no, of course, yeah.
And learning more about money.
Buy several copies of the book. Well, it's interesting. The book argues, and this is where a lot of people switch off their computers right now or their phones. The book argues that this is not inflation, but you alluded to what it is. And just let's go into a brief background so that it all makes sense. As I argue in the book, or I point out in the book, the beginning and the end, Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations is easily the most important economics book ever written. And one of the most powerful passages in it is when he goes into the pin factory at the beginning. And he notices one worker working alone in the pin factory could maybe produce one pin per day. But several workers working together in specialized fashion in that same factory could produce tens of thousands. What does that tell us? It tells us that when work is divided among individuals, productivity soars, meaning production soars, and prices go down. So you look back to 2020, what did we have before these lockdowns? We had billions of workers around the world working in trillions of different ways with workers around the world. Think about what that meant. Think about the immense productivity that prevailed before the lockdowns. And it explains why prices of so many goods were so low before the lockdowns, because there was immense global sophistication of workers working together, working with machines in symmetry on the way to enormous productivity. Then these lockdowns robbed us of our freedom, of our right to operate our businesses. People were put out of work by the tens of millions around the world. Is it any surprise that prices are higher today? To me, higher prices are a statement of the obvious after this. When you break up what was so productive, you can't put that back together overnight. And so, yes, prices are higher, but they're higher because of the imposition of command and control. That is not inflation. Inflation is a devaluation of the currency unit. The problem is that it didn't happen, and it has not happened in the last 2 years. And so I make a case. It's a lonely case, but I'm not in this just to go along with everyone else and say, oh, isn't it great we think alike? My book makes a case that what people are referring to as inflation is not.
John, please forgive if my question sounds maybe a bit ignorant, but did the Biden's war on fossil fuels play a role in rising prices?
No. Let me explain. When was the U.S. energy industry most dormant due to a lack of production and exploration? It may surprise watchers to know that it was under Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan didn't hate the energy industry. He didn't conduct a war against it. But Ronald Reagan ran on strengthening and stabilizing the dollar. And with a strong dollar in the 1980s, the price of a barrel collapsed, went all the way at one point to $8 a barrel. Fast forward to the 1990s, the U.S. energy industry was similarly dormant. Bill Clinton was not a fan of the energy industry, but like Reagan, his administration pursued a strong, mostly stable dollar. You could argue that he was better than Reagan on the matter of the dollar. No surprise then that price of a barrel was $10 a lot of the time in the 90s. It was $12 a barrel as recently as 1998. I bring all of this up to point out that it has nothing to do what a president says or believes about energy. George W. Bush was a former oil man, but the price of a barrel at one point sextupled during his presidency. Why? He pursued a weak dollar. The dollar is weaker today relative to what it was in the 80s and 90s. You can see it in the price of gold. That explains higher oil prices. It's not a Biden thing. It's been a 21st century long policy of dollar weakness that continues to rob every American.
Wow, this is very insightful, seriously. John, I would like to thank you so much for your time today and for this very interesting information. Please tell us what's the best way to follow you and your work and where to buy your book.
Well, you can buy my book, Money Confusion, on Amazon. All of my books are on there. All of you watching should buy several copies of all of them. But yeah, my books are on there. You can find me on Twitter at John Tamny. I edit realclearmarkets.com, where I usually put out 3 or 4 columns a week. The columns, of course, lead to these books, but I'm everywhere you look. If you Google my name, you can find me. And thank you for watching. If you're looking for a book that rejects all the conventional wisdom about money and inflation, and also a short one, 150 words, free of charts and equations, you've found the right one. And I promise it will make you rethink what you've been taught about money and inflation.
Thank you so much.
Sophia paused before the door. It read, Department of Bidigital Convergence. Just inside was a new world, a better world, the one of everlasting life, of no pain, of no loss, of no problem. She entered the chamber and her surroundings changed. She saw around her an infinite field of waving golden grain surmounted by cloudless blue sky. The AI voice whispered gently in her mind, Welcome to the singularity. She couldn't see it and couldn't feel it, but her body had almost instantly been covered by a swarm of tiny gray multi-legged bots that melted through her clothes and into her skin. Not perceiving the nightmare, her eyes had already been consumed and the rest of her body was dissolving as the bots digested her flesh. She felt only a warmth suffusing her being. Drowsy, she drifted to sleep, and her last thought was one of panic. Would she ever wake? Could a nightmare vision like this be an outcome of the much-hyped transhumanist technological singularity? Enter the world of the future as illuminated by the experience of the past in Endgame, the new book by Dennis Barrett, the publisher of the New American Magazine, and find out how the disastrous COVID pandemic response fits with the technocratic elite's thirst to create a transhumanist utopia. Get Endgame from shopjbs.org with free shipping with code ENDSHIP. ENDSHIP. Or get Endgame and the Great Reset Collector's issue of the New American Magazine and get free shipping plus an additional 20% off both with code N20, END20.